In this video, we'll create a MongoDB database for our backend API. First, we'll create the MongoDB database, and then once we receive the connection string, we'll copy and paste it over here in the environment variable connection string. Now let's open up the Google and type MongoDB. Open up the official website of MongoDB Atlas database. Just wait here. Click on sign in. You have multiple ways to sign in, but we'll be using Google to sign into this account. Select any email. After you're logged in, you will see this view on your screen. So start by first granting some network permissions, and then we'll move to grant some create a database user and then grant that user some database permissions. So we'll go to the network access, and then you can edit the first configuration as well, or you can create new one as well, right? It depends on you, whatever seems convenient to you. You can just add a new IP address, but what I will do, I'll just edit the one already created. It is recommended that you type the IP address of the backend, but since we are actually doing it for testing purpose, you can just leave it 0.0.0, which means that any IP address can access the database. Yes, 0.0.0, and then 0 port means that any IP address and any application with using any port can access the database. For production application, this is not recommended, but since we are testing, we can just leave it like that. And then let's go to the database access. Here we need to create a user. You can just delete all the users if then they're not required. You can just create add, and then we will be using password as a method of authentication. Just type any name here, Enatega test. User is our username, and then the password can be anything that is simple to remember, or you can auto generate your secure password. Just make sure that you remember the username and password, because we will be using the username and password to connect to the MongoDB database. Another important thing that you are not supposed to miss is assign a role to the user. So you can just come to the built-in role drop-down and assign it the required role. Since I'm an admin, so I'll assign it an admin role. Now all the resources have been assigned, all the configuration. Now let's go to the database section. Now here we have a cluster over here that is a default cluster. You can click on connect, come to the MongoDB for VS Code, and this is the configuration that we need to follow to connect to the MongoDB. Or you can create a new cluster for yourself, and this will not be free. The default cluster is free, but if you want to create another cluster, you have to pay for it. You can select the region you want to create in, the provider, and then different specs for the cluster. And now it will ask for the payment and how you will be charged. Now we are not required to do it, we'll just use the free cluster for our testing. Thus will be charged $0.012 per hour. You can see we have different tiers over here. So you can just cancel it and go back to the main screen. And here we'll just, we do not need to create the cluster. So the name of the cluster is cluster 0, and we will be using it to create different databases and collections in it. New clusters will be charged. So let's go with the default one. So click on the browse collections. There are multiple ways to route to this path, but you can just now you can see that we have an option to create database. You can just click create the new one, or maybe drop the old one so you can create it. So you can recreate it. Now create database. Now you can see that the one mistake that I did was that my username and my database name are same. So don't get confused with it. You can change it. You can name anything you want your database. You can see that my username for the account was Enatega test user, and I also set the name of the database to Enatega test user, right? You can tap the default collection, which is user, and then click create, and then this will create a database for you with the name Enatega test user and a default table or collection named user. Now let's go back to the overview or the home page. Now here we need to connect to this database. So you can click on the connect and select MongoDB for VS Code. And we need to follow this. Now we have a default connection string. We will copy it. And this is the database that will be connecting to Enatega-test-user. You can see that the Enatega test user is both our username and database, and this was a mistake, but you are more than welcome to change your database name. Now let's follow the instructions and connect to the database. Alright, so just copy and paste the default connection string, and now you have to just change the password. Now we already saved the password in the notepad. You can just copy the password and paste it in the connection string. Make sure to remove the brackets. The next step is to type the database name. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that we set the database name as our username, so don't get confused with that. You can change it when you're creating the database, when you're creating the database, or you can delete this one and create a new one. And now we just need to add one last thing to the connection string. And now we're done. Now this is a complete and valid connection string. Now just make sure that you have given proper network access permissions and database permissions for this uh, connection string to work. Now I have a tool, a software known as MongoDB Compass. This is a local graphical user interface that you can use to connect it. Just paste your connection string over here and click on connect, and this will connect your software with the database. Now you can see that we have successfully connected to the cluster, and the left side we have all the databases, and the our database that we created earlier was Enatega test user, and you have there in the list. You can just expand it, and we can see that we have a user table over here. You can add and insert any JSON data over here. We have successfully connected to the MongoDB database, and we also pasted the connection string in the environment variable.